So over the weekend, President Trump lobbed an incredibly racist attack against Representative Elijah Cummings. Now, following his criticism of the state of the border, Trump lashed out at Cummings, calling his district a rodent-infested mess. Jeez. Now, his district encompasses much of Baltimore, right? And his district is 53% African American. So remember that context. It's kind of important here. So now let me give you the tweets first. He says, Representative Elijah Cummings has been a brutal bully. Already we're starting out great. Shouting and screaming at the great men and women of Border Patrol about conditions at the southern border, when actually his Baltimore district is far worse and more dangerous. His district is considered the worst in the USA. That's not actually true. As proven last week during a congressional tour, the border is clean, efficient, and well-run, just very crowded. Cummings district is a disgusting rat and rodent-infested mess. Also not true. If you spent more time in Baltimore, maybe he could help clean up this very dangerous and filthy place. Then, further on, he goes on to ask, why is so much money sent to the Elijah Cummings district? Which, that's not okay. Anyway, when it's considered the worst run and most dangerous anywhere in the United States, again, not true. No human being would want to live there. Why don't you ask the people of Baltimore before you make that statement? Where is all this money going? How much is stolen? Investigate this corrupt mess immediately. I love how he goes for, oh my God, it's corrupt and dirty and rat infested. And then we're sending them so much money, but they must be stealing it. Wow, as if the dog whistle is not loud enough. It is a human whistle. You ever notice how, by the way, he only calls African American majority areas infested? I wonder why that is. Now, here's the reality, right? So the United States actually does have one of the worst areas for human beings, right? And some of the worst poverty in the world, not the world, but the developed world, right? So that includes, of course, the United States, Canada, European Union, etc. Again, the developed world, right? So it doesn't really count developing countries where there's even more massive, horrific poverty. This is just for countries that, are at a certain level, right? So what state has the worst poverty in the developed world? One of the worst places for you to live is in America. That would be Alabama. Alabama. In fact, the UN came in and they're like, I cannot believe people live like this in a country, that is so incredibly wealthy. There were people suffering from, what was it, hookworm or ringworm? Those are illnesses basically thought to have been eradicated in the United States and are really only present in third world countries. We have conditions in Alabama that people live in that are akin to third world nations without proper sanitation. And he's talking about Baltimore. But again, this is the problem, right? We have a super wealthy country where the gains are not being shared amongst the people. Most of the minorities who in the history of America, by the way, got held back from achieving generational wealth. I mean, you have slavery, Jim Crow, segregation. Now you have redlining and other practices, right, that discriminate against African Americans. And, of course, you even had violent actions against African American-owned businesses. I mean, you ever heard of Black Wall Street? A lot of people haven't, because it was literally burnt down by a group of angry white supremacists. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about some of those issues facing the African American community. I mean, slavery, not that long ago. There are people, I'm sorry, did I say slavery? No, I actually meant segregation. I meant segregation and civil rights. Remember the civil rights fight? There are still people alive that were, that were in that fight, that were literally fighting for the same rights for human beings of a different color. They're still alive. So this is not something that is ancient history that's old. It's recently happened, and so we still have a lot of issues, right? So why don't we talk about that? Oh, right, because a lot of Trump's base are people who chased out those black-owned businesses and black-owned business owners. So now I want to go to the response here from Representative Cummings. So he hit back on Twitter with this. Mr. President, I go home to my district daily. Each morning I wake up and I go and fight for my neighbors. It is my constitutional duty to conduct oversight of the executive branch. So, of course, a lot of this, these attacks against Elijah Cummings comes from him trying to do his oversight authority. And Donald Trump, no like that. But he also added, it is my moral duty to fight for my constituents. Just yesterday, I held a hearing on the skyrocketing prices of prescription drugs and the financial hardships that families across the nation and in Baltimore are facing. So that's something, by the way, that's important because President Trump had promised to do something about the soaring prices of prescription drugs. And yet, what has he done? Absolutely nothing. He basically said, you pharmaceutical companies, you should cut that out. I solved the problem. No, he didn't. I've done previous reporting where you had drug companies that continue to raise the prices of their drugs even more dramatically as they did before. Why is that? Because they know that Donald Trump is a paper tiger. He will do absolutely nothing to address this. Meanwhile, you had Senator Bernie Sanders just over the weekend taking a bunch of people over to Canada in order to get cheaper insulin. Yeah, so that happened, right? So now I'm going to get more tweets here from Elijah Cummings responding to this. He says, Mr. President, we can address this together. 2 years ago, I went to the White House to ask you to endorse my bill to let the government negotiate directly for lower drug prices. That's, of course, allowing Medicare to do that, which would, of course, help. And he said, you told me then that you supported the legislation, that you would work with me to make it happen. I took you at your word. I took you at your word. Well, man, that's the first mistake. Never take Donald Trump at his word. Look, here's the thing. I'm tired of representatives treating Donald Trump as if he is some sort of rational actor, like he is a fellow politician like themselves that is actually interested in governing this country. He's not. He's not. Look, Donald Trump is the proverbial tiki torch being wielded by white supremacists. That's who he is. Sooner or later, he's going to catch something on fire, right? It's going to burn down. And look, he may not be the disease, but he is the most visible symptom. So please, let's stop legitimizing this guy. Again, over and over and over. The last, few years, since Donald Trump became president, and even beforehand, I kept saying, stop legitimizing the guy. He is not a rational person. He was not going to work with you. He's just not. But look, the Democrats, and this is what frustrates me about Democrats, by the way. They can't help but be conciliatory to a guy who is figuratively sitting on top of you, telling you to stop hitting yourself while he uses your own hands to punch yourself in the face. That's what he's doing. You want to talk about brutal bullying? That guy's the bully. This is total projection. And he is not interested in solutions. He is not the adult in the room. He is nothing more than a self-important man-child who has been entrusted with way too much power. White poverty, black poverty, he doesn't care. He doesn't care about poverty. And that's the thing. That's why Alabama, full of his voters, he doesn't care about them either. And look, you know why? It's because he doesn't actually like poor people. He hates poor people. But he does love the poorly educated because they end up voting for him while he sits there and laughs about how much of a sucker you are. Because Donald Trump loves taking advantage of suckers. And they are born literally every minute when it comes to him. He's never met a sucker he did not love. Because he's a con artist. And so, look, not only do the people that support him, are they suckers, right? because we know they are. But they also love the racist dog whistles. They love to blame black people for poverty because they desperately want to feel superior to someone else. So the sooner we stop legitimizing this guy and thinking that we can work with him and take his lies at face value, the sooner you can actually be the resistance. Hey guys, hopefully you enjoyed that free video. Now I'm going to have to ask you a favor. Between the demonetization and the YouTube algorithm messing around with view counts, etc., we're having a hard time adjusting to the new YouTube reality, which is where you guys come in. See, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/TYTNation, set up to help us rely on you guys, the viewers, instead of big corporate ads. Look, you know the show. You know I'm not in favor of big corporations anyway. So help us transition away from relying on the ad model to pay the bills and sign up to be a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. That goes a long way to help us keep the lights on. And you guys will know that you're supporting independent progressive media.